Hi, I'm Dave Hachey. I founded Ogena Solutions back in January of 2005. And for those of you that don't know us, we're the company that in 2008 introduced the leading, what today is the leading hydrogen peroxide-based disinfectant into animal health. We were the exclusive distributor of it until 2019 when we reached an agreement with the manufacturers for them to take over the line. But now we're working on air purification systems, and this video is an instructional video to help you to get a sense of what's going on in the marketplace and maybe how you can help yourself, when you're trying to make decisions. So the next slide is. This is the thing I find so kind of ironic. Like outdoor air and water have been regulated for a long, long time, but indoor air hasn't been, and because of that, there's been a lot of games, especially since COVID, from companies that put out misleading marketing claims, and I think fraudulent. Some companies are just outright putting out fraudulent marketing claims. There's actually lawsuits going on in a couple of places in the U.S. for companies that sold, systems that generated ozone for use inside classrooms. Anyway, so hopefully this is going to give you a little bit of information to help you when you're looking at these different systems. There's a lot of good systems out there, so hopefully you can, get a sense when you're looking at something what might make sense for you to pay attention to. So I took this slide right off of the EPA website, and somebody posed a question like, why aren't some of these units, UV lights and ozone generators, ionizers, why aren't they on list N? And for those of you that don't know what list N is, that's the listing of pesticides, and the EPA considers viruses and bacteria as pests, so disinfectants are classified as pesticides. Air purifiers aren't, even though people know UV lights work. Ion generating systems have worked for a long time, but both of them have had some negatives that come along with the use of them. That's changing. There's units out there now that both on the UV light side and on the ion generating side that work. But this is the EPA's kind of given a little warning, I think. They're starting to pay attention. A couple of years ago, they put out a requirement that every air purifier manufacturer that was selling in the United States had to register their company with the EPA. And to me, that was a sign that regulation's coming. The EPA being the EPA is probably going to take a long time. They have a lot of things to work on, but I think for them to get everybody to register, I think that was a sign that something's coming. And the first thing you're going to do is find out who all the players are. So they've already done that. So hopefully some regulation will be coming. But this is a shot across the bow. They're warning companies that are selling these products. They better be careful, which to me was a nice thing to see. So there is some regulation. So if you're looking at units, California does regulate air purifiers. So you can go on I've got a link here that you can go to, but if you just search for, CARB certified air cleaning devices on the internet, I'm sure you can find it as well. You can find the listing. The second one, they're talking mechanical is pretty clear. That's HEPA filters or MERV filters, any of these type of things that mechanically capture and collect particles out of the air. And because they capture particles, and viruses and bacteria are attached to particles, they also capture viruses and bacteria to some extent. But the electronic ones, this is a bigger area where a lot of games have been played. These units, including ionizers, electrostatic precipitators, hydroxyl generators, all of these units are on that list, and they're testing them to make sure that these units don't put out too much ozone. Okay, so that's the idea. So if you look at a product and has CARB certification, that's a pretty good indicator that at least it's safe. They might give off some ozone, but at least it's an amount of ozone that the California Air Resources Board has deemed to be safe. So that would be kind of a minimum to look for. This is something that's kind of interesting. Intertech, for those of you that aren't familiar with Intertech, they're the largest testing and certification company in the world. So they announced in March of this year that it looks like it's going to be sometime in 2023, but they are going to be giving a certification standard for the removal or inactivation of viruses and bacteria in the air. So this is pretty cool because it's the first real recognition, I think, that some of these units actually work, UV lights, ionizers. So that's pretty cool. And if Intertech does a test, you'll know that the unit is safe. So when it comes down to certification, here's some of the things you could look for to help you be better assured that you're buying something that's safe. The first one's a standard across the board for any product you buy that plugs into a wall. You want to look for the ETL certification test that's done by Intertech normally. It's the UL 507 electrical safety certification. That's just a given. Anything that plugs into a wall should have it. If it's a HEPA system, the really good thing is for many years now they've had a CADR rating, clean air delivery rating, that you can use, and it's really helpful because it can help you select the right size unit to suit the room that you're putting it in. Normally with HEPA you got to buy a unit for every room, and you want to make sure you get the right size unit. So whether it's HEPA or MERV filters, these clean air delivery ratings are really useful. But in some way, they're a bit misleading. HEPA filters are usually marketed as capturing 99.97% of the particles. But what they don't tell you is that that's a measurement of what's coming out of the filter after it's the amount the actual filter can capture, which makes perfect sense. But for me to have it bring it into the real world, because that's not what the unit will do in the room you put it in. If you put a HEPA filter, properly sized HEPA filter into a room, it will capture on average about 50% of the particles in that room, in a standard room. If you had and that's right from ASHRAE. ASHRAE is the organization that develops the indoor air quality standards for both residential and commercial settings in North America. Their standards are used by the EPA and Health Canada. And the reason being, if you have a surgical suite, and that room is designed for HEPA, placement of the beds, everything. It's got its own HVAC system, its own heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And it's actually designed so all the air in that room goes through those filters 10 to 20 times an hour. And that's not going to happen in the room you're sitting in today. In the room you're sitting in today, most places are designed with 1 to 2 air changes per hour. It's pretty much a standard. If you had a good HEPA system, you can add another air change per hour, which is obviously a great thing. That's 50% more, than 2 air changes per hour. But it's certainly not 10 to 20 air changes per hour. And because of the shape of the room, knowing where to place it, all the air in the room is not going to get through that filter. It's just the way it is. So ASHRAE says on average, it's about 50% of the particles that a HEPA system can capture. It's still very good, but not 99.97% that we always see in the marketing claims. So the next is UV bulbs. Anything that has a UV bulb in it, you want to look for the 62471 certification and which standard it's been assigned to. So there's 4 different standards. There's 0. So if you hit the 0, they'll call your product exempt from the standard. And then there's 1, 2, and 3. Each of them is worse, basically. And this is a test for radiation, for UV radiation coming out of the device. So that's not a good thing. It's not good for your skin. It's not good for your eyes. And these standards can really help you. If you can look for a unit that at least has level 1 certification, then it, like the PPE, the protection you have to have in place to ensure your eyes don't get damaged or your skin aren't as onerous, nowhere near as onerous as if you get into, once you get into level 2 and 3, it's a little crazy. I would suggest you really look for products that at least have level 1, and better yet, look for products that hit the exempt, because if it's exempt, it means there's no radiation coming out of that unit. So at least get level 1 though, because then you're in a pretty good space. So the other thing is a lot of UV bulbs, the majority of them give off ozone. So you want to look for the certification, the CARB, California Air Resource Board certification, which tells you the product is a low ozone device and that it's safe to use around people and animals. So at least look for that. Just like I talked about the radiation standard, at least try and get that. If it's a product you want, it's the one you're looking for, look for CARB at least, so that you and your family or your co-workers and pets are safe. Better yet, once again, look for the UL 2998 certification. That's a zero ozone device, and you can't get better than that. So ion generators, same deal with ion generators. They've been around for a long time. They've been considered an emerging technology by the EPA and Health Canada purely because the units generate ozone. So they've never really made it into the mainstream. There's been a ton of people, and there still are today, selling ion generators that put out unsafe levels of ozone. It's just, especially because of COVID, it's just not right. It's not right. So look for one that at least has CARB certification. You know, these units do work, and they're safe ones you can buy today. So look for one that at least has CARB as your assurance that at least it's safe. You know, it gives off some ozone, but it's not, you know, a dangerous level of ozone. But once again, better yet, if it's got the UL 2998 certification, you know it's an ozone-free device. So hopefully that helps. So this is just a slide outlining some of the things that, if you see, should be a bit of a red flag. Companies that quote test results from tests that were done on somebody else's device, or someone's or a technology. So, for example, you know, we've been selling a hydrogen peroxide-based disinfectant that's EPA certified. It'd be like somebody else saying, "Oh, our product uses hydrogen peroxide too, so we work just as well." Like that's not good enough. It would never pass any standard. You have to have tests on the exact product you're selling to prove that your product does what you say it can do. Next is companies that use tests that are done in tiny chambers. It's really common with systems that have UV lights, systems that generate ions like ours. It's really common for companies to take their unit and put it inside a small test chamber, and sometimes as small as 1 cubic meter, like a cubic yard. That says a foot. Sorry, that should say 1 cubic yard or meter. And they'll put it in this little chamber and test it, let it run at full power. And sure, they're going to get great results in this tiny little chamber. But right on your box, you're saying that this unit is good for 500 square feet or 1,000 or 2,000 square feet. Well, how do you correlate these tests on this tiny little room? Where do you get the understanding that it's going to be able to do that in this huge space? They give you nothing to prove that. So really watch for that. Companies should give you something to prove that. The next is not testing the GLP laboratory practice standards. So many of you will know GLP standards are you know, the studies that are accepted in science. For any regulatory requirement, they will always need to be done to GLP standards, because GLP standards are standardized across the world. So a study done in Tokyo will end up the same as a study done in the United States or in Canada or anywhere. And secondly, it establishes protocols that have to be followed, that ensure that the study being done properly, that you're going to be able to say that at the end of the study the results are something that makes sense in science. So why would people not do GLP studies? Two things. Expense. A GLP study is 2 to 3 times more expensive. So now you take a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 study and you've tripled that cost, or doubled it at least. You know, that holds people back. The second one's kind of big too, because you can't change the protocols in a GLP study. So you can't escape it. You have to do it exactly the way the protocol is written. And sometimes people don't like that because they might not be able to pass. So doing a non-GLP study allows you to toy with the parameters in ways that are too often good for the manufacturer and not so good for the consumer, people buying the product. Next one, not openly sharing their full test reports. So we don't anymore, obviously. I told you we're not in the disinfectant business anymore, but when we were, for those 15 or so years, we passed, you know, the product passed EPA standards. Those study reports are completely open to anybody to look at. So, but in the air purification industry, it's almost no one does it. They just don't want to share their studies, and if they do, it's little excerpts, or the lab's name's been removed, and there's all kinds of. I don't understand it. Why wouldn't you share the entire study so people can see the lab you did it at, so people can research that lab, so people can see that, you know, real scientists signed off on the report that they certified that it's a GLP study. You know, if you've done the tests and it was done properly, why would you be afraid to share it? I don't understand. Last one. This only applies to units that generate ion levels, generate ions in the space. If you test in that, there's a picture of a more standard chamber at 16 cubic meters. It's basically 10 by 10 by 8 foot high. If you put an ion generator in there and run it, you know, at full blast, you can get amazing results. But who's going to be able to say that your unit can do that over the square footage you're rating it for? So I mentioned it there earlier, but that's basically they should first test their unit to find out how many square feet can the unit generate the ions you need, and then control the study so that you don't get those ion levels over that. That's just a no-brainer. This one that's in red is really big. If you see not available for sale in California, I can virtually guarantee you it's an ozone generator. And to me, it's just not, it's not ethical, you know, to sell these to use around people and animals. I would run away. If you're going to use it in a space where and only have it running when there's no people around or animals around, it's a different story. People use ozone generators all the time. They're very effective. Ozone works, but it's just not good for you or me or our little buddies, you know. Okay, so this is just talking a little bit about photocatalytic oxidation. It's one of a couple of different ways that nature actually generates ions, and these ions have been shown to be capable of killing viruses and bacteria in the air, as well as mold spores, and not just in the air. This is really important. They also kill viruses and bacteria and mold on surfaces. So every surface in a space will continuously be cleaned by these ions. So they're already around us. They're already present in nature. After a lightning storm, there can be tens of thousands of ions in the air around us. They're harmless. Think about how many things are in the air around us. There's probably 10,000 or 100,000 or maybe 200,000 phone calls going on in the air around you right now where you're sitting. Like, how is that possible? I don't know. How many television stations, CB radios, how many viruses are in the air around us, bacteria, how many different types of particles in there. There's so many things in the air around us, it's unbelievable. You can't see any of it, but it's there. And ion is one of the good ones. You know, the ions are a very helpful part of nature. And what these units are, these ones are photocatalytic oxidation of systems that generate ions by, same way nature generates them by the ultraviolet light of the sun reacts with particles in the air and the soil, and it generates ions. So these are units that do the same thing, so that you can push more ions into a space and get them up to a level where they actually kill, where they're known to kill viruses and bacteria and mold and odors. So that's the idea behind it. It just boosts up the levels, usually around 3-4 times higher than what's in the air around us on any given day. And if you keep them at that level, these units are going to be constantly destroying, you know, over 99% of viruses and bacteria and mold in the air and on surfaces, which is a key. So the big thing, though, they've been held back from the marketplace. They've been called an emerging technology by the EPA and Health Canada. For one big reason, that the units have generated ozone, and there's still a lot of them on the marketplace that generate ozone. So if you're going to look at these units, try and make sure you at least get a unit that's CARB certified, because then you know that yes, it does generate ozone, but at least it's a safe level of ozone. And better yet, if you can get a unit that's UL 2998 certified, then you know you've got a unit that doesn't generate any ozone at all. So the other really cool part about these units is for the square footage cost for protection, it can't be beat. They're far less expensive, far less expensive than filtration technologies. Arguably, they work better. When it comes up to killing, you know, viruses and bacteria, not particles, because HEPA filters are much better at capturing particles, which means something as well. But they're very inexpensive and almost maintenance free. The cell in the unit, generally speaking, can last years before you have to replace it, and they're not that expensive. So something for you to consider, I hope. So the last slide. Thanks for taking the time. I hope it helps you, in your selection on what you're looking at. There's a lot of good products on the market out there, and hopefully those will help you at least pick something that has been tested properly and is safe. Totally respect everybody's decision on buying the things that they feel are good for them. So good luck in your search. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to help. Just contact us. Our phone number is here or send us an email to inquirers@ogenasolutions.com. So again, thank you for your time. I hope it was helpful. Cheers. Take care.